The woman in the pale blue cardigan had been reported missing from a memory care facility in Savannah 48 hours earlier. Cole didn't know that yet. He was watching his dog. Valor had worked 1,200 hours across 4 years of airport duty. He had never, in any of those hours, done a full stop for a person. Bags, luggage, vehicles, never a person. The training didn't include people. Belgian Malinois weren't trained for that at Hartsfield-Jackson. There was no protocol, no signal, no reason for what the dog was doing right now. Valor was doing it anyway. Complete freeze. Every muscle locked, head forward, fixed on one point across 40 feet of polished terminal floor. A small elderly woman being walked toward the exit by two men who held her arms and smiled at everyone who looked at them. Cole watched her left hand. The fingers were moving under the hem of her cardigan sleeve. Three pressed together, spread apart. Pressed, spread, repeating. Small and deliberate and invisible unless you were already looking. He had been in law enforcement for 11 years. He had never seen that signal. His dog had never alerted on a person. Both of them were doing something that wasn't supposed to be possible. Cole had 4 seconds before they reached the door. Thank you for being here. Before we continue, please subscribe and hit like if stories like this matter to you. And tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I love knowing who's out there listening. Her name was Dorothy Marsh, 74 years old, 41 years in the same house in Decatur, Georgia. Before the disease started taking things from her, she was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday in the neighborhood, kept a garden that won a county prize 3 years running, and made coffee strong enough to wake the dead every morning at 5:45. Her husband Warren had bought the coffee grinder one Saturday in 1987, set it on the counter and said, "Dorothy, life is too short for bad coffee." She had laughed at him. She still laughed at that memory on the days she could reach it. Warren Marsh had served 22 years in the United States Army, military police, K-9 unit for the last 11 of those years. 4 dogs across 3 deployments, Germany twice, Kuwait once, then a final tour stateside training handlers at Fort Benning. He had loved every one of those dogs with the devotion of a man who understood exactly what they were capable of. There was a story Warren told only once, late in his career, that Dorothy had never forgotten. It was 1991. Fort Benning, a training exercise in the woods east of the base, had gone wrong. A young soldier, 22 years old, had fallen into a ravine in the dark and broken both his legs. He had been out there for 11 hours by the time anyone realized he was missing. Search teams had covered the perimeter twice. The soldier hadn't called out, hadn't signaled, hadn't done anything that a person with 2 working legs and a functioning radio would have done. Warren had gone in with Ajax. The dog found the soldier in 4 minutes. The young man was in shock, past the point where the body makes noise, past the point where instinct produces sound. He was lying at the bottom of a 15-foot drop in complete silence, and the search teams on foot had passed within 30 yards of him twice without knowing. Ajax had known. Warren had told Dorothy, the dog didn't find him by sound. He found him by what the body gives off when it's in that kind of distress. There's a chemistry to it. Fear has a smell. Shock has a smell. A good dog doesn't need you to make noise. He only needs you to be there. Dorothy had asked, did the soldier make it? Warren said, he did. Lost 2 toes to frostbite, 6 weeks recovery. Came back to the unit and requested reassignment to K-9 training. He paused, he said, he told me afterward that he heard the dog before he heard anything else. Not a bark, just the sound of something moving toward him in the dark that knew he was there. Dorothy had thought about that story many times over the years. The soldier in the ravine. The silence that isn't giving up. It's just the body past the point of noise. And the dog that comes anyway. She thought about it more after her diagnosis. After the Army, he joined the Decatur Police Department as a K-9 liaison, training handlers, evaluating ties, consulting on searches, 9 years until his knees gave out. Even after that, he volunteered twice a month at the K-9 facility. He brought coffee. He watched the dogs work. He never stopped being proud of what a trained animal could do. Dorothy had been the center of Warren's life for 43 years. Not in a way he announced, in the small details. The way he always filled her coffee cup first. The way he noticed when she was tired before she said anything. The way he built two-seater chairs for the porch the summer their son Michael was born, positioned so the left chair caught the evening light, because Dorothy liked the light and Warren liked watching her in it. She always sat in the left chair. He always sat in the right. Warren died 6 years ago. Cardiac event, fast, no warning. Dorothy found him in the garden on a Thursday morning. The roses he'd been pruning were still in his hand. She called Michael before she called anyone else. She was very calm on the phone. Michael understood later that the calm was not composure. It was shock so complete it had no edges. Dorothy's diagnosis came 3 years after Warren died. The neurologist used the phrase early onset progression, a careful way of saying Dorothy was losing herself in pieces, not all at once. Some days she was entirely herself, sharp, funny, precise. Other days the words didn't come. Other days she looked at Michael and saw a stranger in her kitchen and felt a fear so sourceless she sat down on the floor because standing felt wrong. She told Michael once, on a clear afternoon on the porch, "The worst part isn't forgetting. It's the moment between when you can feel something slipping and you can't stop it. Like watching a photograph fade while you're still holding it." Michael had not known what to say. He had sat with her. Since then, he had installed stove locks, removed the car keys, arranged daily check-ins with the neighbor Ruth, hired a part-time aide named Carla. He spent hours researching memory care facilities, comparing, postponing a decision he knew was coming. He had not made it yet. 6 weeks before the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, Michael sat with his mother on the porch the night before his Dallas trip. Left chair, right chair, the way it had always been, except the right chair was his now. He took her hands. He said, "Mom, I want to show you something Dad used to teach." She looked at him. He said, "When Dad worked K9, the dogs were trained to recognize signals from people who couldn't speak. People in shock, people who were hurt, people too scared to get words out. There was a gesture, 3 fingers pressed together, then spread, that handlers used to confirm a distress alert. Dad taught it to me when I was 12. He said, if you're ever somewhere and you can't talk and you're near any K9 officer, do this and don't stop." He demonstrated, pressed, spread. Dorothy said, "That's a real signal? Dogs actually know that?" Michael said, "Trained K9s recognize it as a distress indicator. Dad spent 20 years teaching dogs to read people. He knew it worked." Dorothy said, "I won't remember that, Michael." He held her hands tighter. He said, "Your hands will. If you practice it enough times, the movement becomes automatic, like making coffee, like walking to the porch. The hands remember even when the rest of us doesn't." They sat for an hour that evening, Dorothy's pressing 3 fingers together and spreading them while Michael counted repetitions and the street went dark and quiet. She complained twice that it was silly. He agreed both times and kept counting. He left for Dallas the next morning. He was in a conference room on the 14th floor when his phone rang. The two men had been working the airport circuit for 14 months. The method was simple and it worked because airports were built for movement and movement made people look forward, not sideways. Baggage claim was best. Travelers just arrived, disoriented, tired, sometimes holding claim tickets they couldn't match to bags. Elderly travelers alone were easiest. A name on a luggage tag, a warm voice using that name, a hand on the elbow before any alarm could form. The man who had taken Dorothy's elbow had done it 10 times before. He had never been stopped. Cole Britton was 29 minutes into his terminal sweep when Valor stopped. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving was the busiest travel day of the year at Hartsfield. 42 million passengers annually. On this particular Tuesday, a significant fraction seemed to be moving simultaneously. Cole knew the rhythms. Valor worked beside him the way he always worked. Loose lead, nose up, reading everything. Valor had been trained across 3 disciplines: narcotics, explosives, and behavioral distress recognition. The third was the rarest. It required the dog to read not objects, but people. The physiological signatures of fear, coercion, and acute stress the body produces whether it wants to or not. Elevated cortisol changed a person's scent. Acute stress altered breathing, muscle tension, the micro movements of extremities. Valor had never failed a distress alert. Cole watched the dog's ears move left and lock. He followed the angle. The two men were moving the woman efficiently through the crowd near the north exit. Not fast enough to attract attention, not slow enough to linger. The outside man kept one hand on her elbow with the grip of someone who has practiced looking casual while maintaining control. The inside man carried her bag and used his body to guide her the way you guide something without it noticing. They spoke to each other over her head. They did not speak to her. The woman's feet moved with them, but her body didn't belong to the motion. She moved the way people move in the moments after something goes wrong, but before they understand what it is. And her left hand was doing something. 3 fingers pressed together. Spread, pressed, spread. Barely visible, tucked against the side of her cardigan, repeating with the regularity of something practiced rather than accidental. Cole looked at Valor. Valor looked at the woman. Cole said quietly, "Show me, boy." Valor moved. The two men noticed the dog at 20 feet. Cole watched their bodies register it. The outside man's grip tightened a fraction. The inside man shifted the bag to his other hand, putting it between himself and Cole. Small calibrations, the kind made by people who had thought about this moment before. Cole kept his pace easy. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you folks need any direction? It's busy today." The outside man turned first. Wide smile, practiced warmth. "Just getting our aunt to her gate. Long trip." She gets a little turned around. Cole looked at the woman. She was looking at Valor. Her left hand had stopped moving the moment the men stopped walking. But her eyes, pale gray, slightly unfocused, were fixed on the toe with an expression Cole had seen before on faces in crisis. Not fear of the dog. The expression of someone who has been sending a message into the dark and has just seen a light answer back. Valor sat, unprompted, without command, directly in front of the woman, looking up at her with the full attention he reserved for confirmed alerts. The woman looked down at him. Her left hand moved again, 3 fingers pressed. Red. The inside man stepped forward. "Officer, she has a cognitive condition. The crowds make her anxious. We really need to get her to the gate before they close boarding." Cole said, "Of course." He looked at the woman. "What's your name, ma'am?" She said clearly, "Dorothy." Cole said to the outside man, "And her last name?" A pause. "Marsh. Dorothy Marsh." Cole crouched to Dorothy's eye level. "Ma'am, my name is Cole. This is my partner, Valor. He wanted to say hello. Is that all right?" Dorothy looked at Valor. Then she said in a voice clearer than anything the two men had heard from her since baggage claim, "He knows, doesn't he?" Not a question. Cole said, "Yes, ma'am, he does." "I'm going to need to see some identification," Cole said. "Both of you, please." The inside man said, "We're her family. This is a family matter." Cole said, "I understand. ID, please." Valor pressed lightly against Dorothy's legs, not restraining, supporting. Her hand came down and found the top of his head and stayed there. The outside man reached slowly for his wallet. Cole photogrammed the license without reaction and handed it back. He said, "Your aunt's son. Do you have his contact?" The outside man said, "We don't want to bother him. He's traveling." Cole said evenly, "How do you know his name?" The outside man said, "He's her son. We know the family." Cole said, "When did he call you this morning? He asked us to meet her." Cole nodded. He said, "What airline is she flying?" The outside man opened his mouth. That was when the airport operations manager appeared. His name was Hendricks. Blue lanyard, clipped efficiency, the look of a man whose entire job was keeping people moving through a building without incident. He had been watching from 15 feet away for 90 seconds and had made a decision. He stepped close to Cole, voice low. "Officer." A word. Cole didn't move from his position. "One moment, sir." Hendricks said, "We have 40 gates backed up and a weather delay on the board. I cannot have a K9 unit stopping passenger flow without a confirmed alert. What has your dog actually flagged?" Cole said, "Behavioral distress." The dog identified a distress signal from this passenger. Hendricks looked at Dorothy, then at Valor. His expression was clear. "That is not a confirmed alert." He said, "Officer, unless there is a specific credible threat, I cannot authorize you to detain these passengers. We have protocols. If your dog hasn't flagged contraband or a weapon, I need you to let these people proceed to their gate." Cole said, "I'm not detaining anyone. I'm asking for identification." Hendricks said, "You've been standing between these people and their gate for 4 minutes. That is a de facto detainment, and it creates liability for this airport. I need you to make a decision right now. Confirmed threat or let them go." Cole said, "Give me 60 seconds. Hendricks said, "You have 30. Dorothy said, "I don't think I know these men." Her voice was quiet, not frightened, factual, the way someone states a thing they have finally located after searching for it. Hendricks paused, but did not stand down. The outside man said immediately, "Aunt Dorothy, you're confused, sweetheart. It's Gary, Warren's nephew." Dorothy looked at Valor. The dog looked back at her. She said, "Warren didn't have a nephew named Gary." Hendricks looked at the outside man, then at Cole. He said, quieter now but still firm, "Officer, people with her condition frequently misidentify." Cole said, "Ma'am, do you know your son's phone number?" Dorothy thought for a moment. Then she recited it. 10 digits, no hesitation. The terminal noise continued around them. Announcements, rolling luggage, the indifferent machinery of 40 million passengers a year. Hendricks said nothing. The outside man said, "She has good days and bad days. Today is a mixed." Cole said, "Sir, stop talking." He looked at Hendricks. "One call. Then you decide." Hendricks stepped back. His face had changed, not surrender yet, but the specific expression of a man who has just understood he was about to make a very bad mistake. Cole called Michael Marsh. 2 rings. Michael picked up. Cole said, "Mr. Marsh, Officer Cole Britton, Atlanta Airport Police. I have a woman with me who says she's your mother. Can you confirm her appearance for me?" Michael's voice came back fast. White hair, blue cardigan, wedding ring on her right hand because her fingers got too thin for the left. "What happened? Is she okay?" Cole looked at Dorothy's right hand, wedding ring, right hand. He held the phone toward the outside man. He said, "This is her son. Would you like to speak with him?" The man looked at the phone, then at the exit doors 40 feet behind Cole's shoulder, then at Valor. Valor stood up. One sound from the dog's chest, not a bark, something lower and certain, a declaration of fact. The outside man moved first. One step back, weight shifting toward the exit. The inside man's hand dropped Dorothy's bag, and his body turned a quarter angle toward the crowd, reading escape routes the way people do when a plan ends. Cole said, "Don't." One word, flat, final. They stopped. 2 plainclothes officers materialized from the crowd at Cole's flanks. The outside man saw them, and something left his face entirely. Not just the warmth, the calculation too. What remained was something older and tired. The expression of a man who has run this same scene many times and has always walked away, and now understands he won't. The inside man said nothing. He put his hands in front of him without being asked. Hendricks stood very still. He looked at Dorothy, then at the 2 men, then he stepped aside and didn't say anything else. Cole guided Dorothy away. She walked without hesitation, steady, certain, as if something that had been pulling at her for 40 minutes had finally let go. As they moved toward the security corridor, she said, "My husband taught me that signal." Cole said, "How long ago?" 40 years, she said. He worked with eyes his whole career. Military, then police. He knew what they could do. She paused. "I don't always remember things, but Michael made me practice it the night before he left." My hands remembered. Cole looked down at Valor walking beside her. He said, "That's why he stopped." She looked at the way. She said, "Warren would have liked him." The security office had 4 chairs and afternoon light through the window. Cole sat Dorothy in the chair by the window because she seemed to settle in light the way some people do. Valor lay down at her feet without instruction. Dorothy kept one hand on his back. Cole called Michael at 12:47. Michael picked up on the first ring. Cole said, "Your mother is safe. She's with me and my partner right now." Michael exhaled, the specific sound of a breath held for 40 minutes, releasing all at once. Cole said, two men approached her at baggage claim. They had her name from the luggage tag, told her you'd sent them. She went with them. We stopped them at the north exit before they reached the doors. Michael said, how long did they have her? Cole said, 40 minutes. Silence. Then, did she use the signal? Cole said, she did. That's how Valor found her. He identified the gesture before I saw anything myself. Michael said, I taught her that the night before I left. She told me she wouldn't remember it. Cole looked through the window at Dorothy. She was talking to Valor, just words here and there, the way people talk to dogs when they aren't worried about making sense. The dog's tail moved once. Cole said, she didn't remember it. Her hands did. You were right about that. Silence. Then, I'll be on the next flight. Sergeant Anita Voss ran airport crimes for the Atlanta field office. 12 years in the division, 9 focused on fraud and exploitation targeting travelers. She arrived at 1:15. She said, luggage tag method. 3 years in our files, name, address, sometimes a phone number. People put everything on those tags and never think about who's watching baggage claim. Elderly travelers alone are the primary target. Cognitive impairment makes them easier to move and harder to use as witnesses afterward. Cole said, how many cases? Voss said, 4 confirmed in our jurisdiction. Nationally, 15 to 30 suspected. Take them, Voss said. Transfer operation, take them? Voss said, transfer operation. They move the person to a secondary location, a private residence, a vehicle, sometimes a storage unit. Hand them to another party who has documentation already prepared. Fake guardianship papers, forged medical records. By the time anyone traces the original disappearance, the person is in another state with a new identity on paper. The phone we recovered has contacts in 7 cities. We don't have confirmed answers on the earlier cases yet. We're working it now. Cole said nothing for a moment. He said, these are people who can't reliably report what happened to them. Voss said, that's the point. That's why they're chosen. Cole looked through the window. Dorothy had fallen asleep. Valor was awake, watching the door. He said, she's 74 with dementia. She couldn't identify them or resist them or tell anyone what was happening. Voss said, no. Cole said, but she remembered a signal her husband taught her 40 years ago. Voss said, her hands remembered. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I ran the husband's name. Warren Marsh. He trained handlers at Benning in the 90s. Consulted on 4 missing persons cases for us between 2003 and 2009. Good man. Good instincts. Cole looked at the sleeping woman in the chair. He said, he prepared her for a world he hoped she'd never need. Voss said, most people don't. The man with the license gave a partial statement at 2:40, enough to confirm the operational structure, luggage tag method, transfer protocol, contact chain. His lawyer arrived at 3:15 and it stopped. It didn't matter. The phone had 11 months of communications. By 6 p.m., Voss's team had contact records across 7 cities, 4 states, and a financial trail connecting to 2 open federal investigations. Voss filed the federal referral at 5:50. Are being contacted tonight. Cole said 3 prior missing persons cases match the profile. All 3 families are being contacted tonight. Cole said, because of a bung and a 74-year-old woman with dementia who remembered a signal her husband taught her on a porch in Decatur 40 years ago. Voss said, yes, she paused. Based on the phone records, at least 6 airports before Atlanta. Cole stood with that number, then went back inside to wait for Michael. Michael landed at 4:40. He stopped when he saw his mother through the window. Dorothy was awake, sitting with both hands in her lap, Valor still at her feet. He had not left her since the terminal. The afternoon light caught the white of her hair. Michael watched her for a moment without going in. He said, Dad always said Malinois were the best for distress work. Sharpest emotional intelligence of any working breed. He had one at Benning, dog named Porter. Talked about that dog for 20 years. Cole said, your mother told me he would have liked Valor. Michael looked through the window. He said, I've been going back and forth on the memory care decision for 8 months. She loves that house. She loves the porch. She goes out every morning and sits in the left chair because that was always her chair. And it still is, even though he stopped. Cole said, she used the signal. Michael said, she did. Cole said, you built a system that worked. It just looked different than you expected. Michael stood with that for a moment. Then he pushed open the door. Dorothy looked up, not the bright immediate recognition of a clear day, something slower, from further back. She said, there you are. Michael crossed the room and crouched beside her chair and put his arms around her. She held on with both hands. Valor shifted to give them room, then lay back down at her feet. He wasn't done yet. There is a photograph on the mantle in the house in Decatur. Dorothy knows it is there even on the days she can't find other things. Warren in his army uniform, young somewhere in Germany, a German shepherd sitting at attention beside him. The dog's name on the back in Warren's handwriting. Ajax, 1979. They had their second date at a diner on Ponce de Leon Avenue in the fall of 1974. Warren had just returned from his first deployment. Dorothy had been teaching third grade for 2 years and had not yet decided what she thought of this quiet, serious man who had asked her to dinner twice and spent both evenings asking her questions and listening to the answers with an attention that felt almost formal, like he was studying for something. That evening, he had talked about Ajax for the first time. He had been trying to explain what the work was like. Not the danger, not the military structure, but the specific texture of working alongside an animal every day. Dorothy had asked, do you give him commands? Warren had set his coffee cup down and thought about it longer than the question seemed to require. He said, less and less. At first, yes, every movement is a command and a response. But after a while, after you've worked together long enough, it becomes something else. He starts to anticipate. He reads what I'm going to do before I do it, and I start to read him the same way. It stops being commands and starts being a conversation. Dorothy said, a conversation without words. Warren looked at her. He said, that's exactly right. He paused. Ajax found a man once, soldier who'd fallen in a training exercise, broken both legs, alone in the woods for 11 hours. The man was in shock, past the point where the body makes noise. Search teams had walked within 30 yards of him twice. Nobody found him. Dorothy said, but Ajax did. Warren said, 4 minutes. And when I got to the soldier, he told me, I heard the dog first, before I heard anything else. Just something moving toward him in the dark that knew he was there. Dorothy had sat with that for a moment across the table. She said, what does that feel like? To be the one moving through the dark towards someone? Warren looked at her. This woman he had known for 6 weeks. This woman he already understood he was going to marry. And he said, it feels like the most important thing I know how to do. Dorothy remembered that answer for 50 years. She had thought about it differently after her diagnosis. The soldier in the ravine, past the point of noise, past the point of asking. And something coming anyway, something that didn't need you to shout. She thought, what if that's me someday? What if that's exactly me? The last real conversation Warren and Dorothy had about the signal happened on the porch the spring before he died. Not the porch conversation Michael had been part of, an earlier one, just the two of them. Warren had been watching her more carefully that spring. Dorothy had noticed and had not said anything because she wasn't ready. But Warren had never been good at leaving necessary things unsaid. He came out on a Sunday evening with 2 cups of coffee and sat in the right chair and said nothing for a while. The street was quiet. The roses along the fence were just starting to come in. Then he said, Dorothy, I want to talk to you about something. She said, I know what you want to talk about. He said, I know you know. She said, I don't want to. He said, I don't want to either, but I'm going to anyway. She looked at the roses. He let her look. Then he said, there may be a time when you're somewhere and the words don't come, when you can't say what's happening or what you need. I've seen that in people I was trying to help. I've seen how frightening it is to need help and not have the words for it. She didn't answer. He said, I want to give you something for that. Something your hands can do when your words can't. Something a good dog will understand. She looked at him then, his face in the evening light, the face she had known for 40 years. She said, show me. He took her hands and showed her. She practiced it with him until the light was gone and the coffee was cold and the street outside was quiet and dark. She told him it was silly. He said, maybe. And then he held her hands again and waited. When they finally went inside, her hands knew what to do. Not because she had memorized it, because he had stayed with her until she did. Warren died the following spring, Thursday morning. The roses were already coming in. Dorothy had not consciously thought about the signal in the 6 years since. It had lived where Warren had put it, in her hands, waiting. Gary Putt and Dennis Lohr were formally charged that evening. Federal charges followed within 72 hours. By January, Voss had connected them to 4 additional cities. 3 federal agencies were involved. Cole filed his report and drove home. He sat in the car in his driveway before going inside. Valor was in the back, asleep the way he slept after real work, deep and still, breathing slow. Cole looked at him in the mirror. He thought about Warren Marsh, a man who had spent 30 years learning what trained dogs could do, who had watched his wife change and understood, before anyone used clinical language, what was coming, who had sat with her on a porch and decided the most useful thing he could do was not pretend it wasn't happening, who had taken her hands and given her the only thing he had that was both small enough to keep and large enough to matter. Not because he believed she would need it, because he loved her with the specific, practical, undeceived love of a man who had spent his life preparing for what the world might bring, and who understood that the best preparation is the kind you give before you're needed. Cole looked at Valor in the mirror. The dog opened his eyes, looked back with the patient certainty he always had at the end of a long shift. Steady, present, waiting. Cole said, "Good work today." Valor's tail moved once against the seat. Inside the family assistance lounge, Michael Marsh was on the phone arranging a late flight for his mother. Dorothy was eating a sandwich and watching Valor with the particular attention she gave things she wanted to hold on to. At one point she said, "What's his name again?" Cole told him. She said it quietly to herself. Valor. The dog's ear moved. She put her hand on his back and left it there. Michael watched her from across the room. The memory care decision was still in his recent calls, still hard, still necessary, but that was tomorrow. Tonight his mother was sitting in the light with her hand on a boy who had found her when she couldn't find herself. Tonight the signal had worked. Tonight Warren Marsh, 6 years gone, had reached across everything that separated then from now and brought his wife home. Michael put his phone in his pocket. He pulled a chair beside his mother and sat in it. Dorothy looked at him. The slow search, the reaching. Then she patted his hand. She said, "Warren would have liked that dog." Michael said, "I know, Mom." She said, "He knew what they could do." Michael said, "He did." She turned back to Valor, her hand on his back. The dog watching the door, patient, certain, exactly where he was supposed to be. Warren Marsh had spent 30 years teaching dogs to find people who had no way to ask for help. In the end, his greatest student wasn't a dog, it was his wife's hands.